Steve Johnson. He is the owner and operator of the Motor City Brew Tours. That's how popular craft beer has become, and the fact that you're able to have tours. Thank you for being with us, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
How did you even come up with the tours?
Like a lot of people, when I traveled, I'd like to go to local breweries, and it always gave me a good side trip to do when I would be traveling for work. And eventually I saw an unmet need in the market that folks wanted to do that in a safe way. And we started offering kind of bus tours to select breweries in the downtown and Metro Detroit area, starting in 2009.
So when you started this adventure, was it part-time, like on the side to see if it would take off, and then grew bigger and bigger as the years passed?
Exactly so. Yeah, I had a full-time job. I had a business partner. He had a full-time job. I was even kind of finishing up grad school at nights. And then on weekends, we started offering the occasional Saturday, buy some tickets, jump on a bus, go to 3 breweries for tours and tastings, get kind of the behind the scenes experience to kind of understand what that particular brewery was doing. And that little by little grew into more things. And as it became more things, I eventually left my corporate job and took this on as a full-time endeavor, and decided to kind of grow it larger and do more than just bus tours as a result of that. So now we do walking tours, bicycle tours. We partner with the Detroit Princess Riverboat and do beer tasting boat cruises and other types of special events. And that has helped it become a full-time job.
Why has Michigan become such a hub for the craft beer industry?
Well, Michigan was really ahead of the game. Michigan had a really great kind of underground homebrew culture. And eventually those home brewers got so great at their product where you had friends saying, you should sell this. And that started in really the mid to late 90s. You started to see kind of your first wave of those home brewers open up what we would consider kind of traditional brew pubs, kind of the make beer and then they have a restaurant. And then eventually the whole industry kind of grew out of that. And as more home brewers decided to get into the business, you had other industries pop up, like schools to go to learn to brew. And now we have a lot of those different things in Michigan that's made the industry a lot larger. And you've seen that kind of cascade across the entire United States in the same way that it started in kind of the mid 90s in Michigan.
So is the interest still there in the middle of a pandemic? Or, I mean, has it freed up time for people to try to make some of these beers at home?
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. Both, right? The breweries that are open have to adapt, and a lot of them have moved to really pushing to-go products. Some of them already had done that to a degree, and some this just made that happen a lot faster. And then folks that had that interest in home brewing, or maybe had walked away from it a little bit just because so much great product was available, I'm sure if you looked at stats, you'd see that people have started brewing at home again because they're stuck at home more. And the circle will kind of repeat itself as we kind of come out of the pandemic and back to a little more of normalcy, and people start hanging out again and more regularity in breweries. I'm sure you'll see another wave of breweries that will open as a result of folks that were making it in their homes again.
So interesting. Steve Johnson with us. He is the owner and operator of the Motor City Brew Tours. So let's talk about your business for a little bit, though. Things at a standstill, how are things going?
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. We're really just in a holding pattern. We stopped like a lot of businesses kind of first week-ish of March. And, we made the decision to not restart tours as some of the economy and some breweries have, reopened. Most places don't want groups coming in, and that's really what our business is. It's a group experience. So that being said, we've decided we're not going to start probably till next spring. And for tourism businesses, definitely in Michigan, your busy period really is kind of May through October. So we would really be slowing down this time of year. We'd still be running, scattered tours on a few weekends a month, but until you get back to the spring and people kind of wake up out of their winter slumber, right? They want to get out again. That's typically when tourism businesses would start up again. So most tourism businesses have kind of made the same decision we have, or if they are running, they're running very, very small groups, like we're saying 4 to 5 people, which isn't it's hard to really make money doing it that way. So you have to look at the economies of it. Luckily, I was in a position where I could kind of shut it down and come back again in the spring, hopefully, as things have eased up a bit.
Steve Johnson with us, owner and operator of Motor City Brew Tours, joining us this morning on the Oakland County MegaCast. So with that being the case, in the meantime, is there anything that your company is doing to continue the traditions of Motor City Brew Tours, to continue to inform the customer base that you have built over these years of what they can do? Anything else that your company has done to pivot during this time that the tours are not going on or just not viable for safety reasons?
Yeah, one is to help spread the word about what local breweries in our area are doing, and that they're still open and you need to support them. And that's probably the biggest thing. And I do that a couple of ways. One, I do that through social media and the channels I have at my disposal with Motor City Brew Tours on Facebook and Instagram and through our website. But I also do it through a monthly podcast I run called the Beer Tour Guy podcast, which is available on all the podcast platforms. Just type in Beer Tour Guy, or you can get the link right on our website, which is motorcitybrewtours.com. And monthly, what I do is I interview folks in the Michigan craft beverage industry business. So people who typically make kind of craft beverages as beer, mead, hard cider, maybe some things on the edges of that, particularly alcoholic beverages. And I interview them, I get their story out of how great their business is and what they're doing in really the downtown and Metro Detroit areas. And that has been what I was doing this before kind of COVID, but I'm continuing to do it now. I'm just doing it in the same way we're doing this interview through Zoom and online types of capabilities where you can get someone's story remotely at a safe distance.
So, Steve, how many beers do you drink in a week? Because it is part of your job, right?
I'm surprised I don't get asked that way more often. I would say I'm probably pretty conservative now that I've been doing this business for a long time. I think anyone who's into a certain thing, you get into it at a peak, and then you try to learn what that right balance is, especially as maybe you get a little older. And I'm not my spry little 20-year-old self anymore. So I would say I'm pretty tame to most folks in what I would drink. If this was my doctor's office right now and I got asked that question, I definitely would say 4 to 5 drinks a week is what I do. Right?
So, but you're not like the wine tasters where they sip it and then they spit it into a bucket, right? You do actually drink it.
That's correct. Yeah, beer typically isn't done that way. Beer drinkers, we love beer, and we like to smell it and taste it and do a lot of things you would do at a wine tasting. You do it at beer tasting, but you drink it. You don't spit it out. If we're running an event or a tasting, we don't have pitchers sitting there for you to dump everything out. I'm not saying people don't do that at beer festivals when they have maybe an off beer, but that's not quite the norm as it might be with wine. That's an interesting question.
So we're hearing a lot lately about mead. What exactly is mead? And is this kind of the new and upcoming thing? Because cider seemed to hit the scene a few years ago and then grew in popularity. Is mead the next thing?
I wouldn't say mead's the next thing. I think mead's just another great thing. And, mead's been around for as long as we've had alcoholic beverages. It's really the oldest alcoholic beverage. And mead is fermented honey. So we're fortunate that we have some of the best makers of mead in the whole United States exist right here in the Metro Detroit area. So we've been really interested in mead for a long time, but mead typically falls into the wine category, but there's a lot of home brewers that have got into it and put kind of a cool craft beer spin on it, where they've put different ingredients in with the fermented honey, such as different juices like a cherry juice with a mead, or apple and honey, or lots of different variations. And I could blow your mind and go through a whole bunch of definitions, but the simplistic way of looking at it is saying fermented honey is mead and any combination of that, where a fermented grain essentially is beer and fermented grapes is wine. So, but mead is taxed on the wine side, not on the beer side, if that makes sense. Same with hard cider, for that matter. Hard cider, which is fermented apples, that's taxed like a wine would be taxed, where beer is taxed differently, and spirits are taxed differently. So you kind of take those buckets, it's like 3 different buckets of how it's looked at from a regulation standpoint. Hopefully that makes sense.
Steve Johnson with us, owner and operator of Motor City Brew Tours, joining us today on the Oakland County MegaCast. Steve, a lot of what, and I hate to continue the comparison to wine tasting and to wine organizations, a lot of that has to do with education of their customers. What goes well with this? What am I looking, if I like these sorts of flavors, or I like this kind of a taste or this kind of a texture, that this is what's right for me, or this is what's right in this kind of a situation for this kind of event, or for this pairing with a certain food, or whatever the case may be. How much of what you're doing right now at Motor City Brew Tours is about education with all these different kinds of home breweries and craft beers that are being made? There's so much nuance to them. How much of an effort are you making, and is Motor City Brew Tours making, in terms of educating the public and educating their customers on these beers and what they're best used for?
Education's a great question. I would say when we first started in 2009, the industry was at a much younger stage, and education, I would have said, was like 90%, and then 10% was social. And when you're running a tour now, I would say it's more 50-50, where today you have people that have grown up with having an abundance of great beer and other alcoholic beverage choices around them, and they already come to you more educated than they used to be. So, and some of that I used to say was a little bit of a generational thing, but even that, now when we started in 2009, if you went into your average, say, party liquor store or grocery store or bar, you really saw mostly domestic, a few imports, and then maybe 1 or 2 local beers. Now, when you go into any of those types of places, there's a million options, right? And a lot of that has to do with now people have grown used to seeing all those options. And a lot of my education revolves around what's the latest things that have come out, where people already know certain aspects of beer, or certain aspects of wine, or certain aspects of mead, or certain aspects of hard cider. They're more interested in what's the new places that have opened up. What are they doing that's different? And a lot of my education revolves around understanding that, understanding all those changes that are happening, and then understanding the customer, what do they normally drink? So if they say, I typically like lighter beers, or I typically like malty beers, or I like fruity stuff, or I like hoppy stuff. And then within that, when you're taking them into a brewery that makes that, you say, okay, well, they make a great hoppy beer, and here's a couple other choices, try one of these. Or they make a great fruity beer, here's a couple other choices, try these. Or if you're gonna travel somewhere else in Michigan, I get asked questions like that a lot too, tourism-related questions of maybe not in the downtown or Metro Detroit area, but they're going to another part of Michigan. Have you ever been to this brewery or that brewery, or this place that makes cider, or this place that makes mead? And there's sharing that goes on in a tour that makes the social aspect of it a lot of fun for tour guests. So education's part of it, but we try not to make it as a snobby thing, more of them understanding where they're coming from, how knowledgeable they may be, and then adding to that, as opposed to standing there and giving like a 20-minute presentation on, the history of hops or something like that, that I feel like most people don't really want that. So we try to make it a little more casual than that, if that makes sense to you.
How much of the local and the smaller craft beer maker are they being impacted by the larger companies now? Because it seems like they're starting to jump on this trend of the craft beer because it's turned out to be popular.
That's a great question. The last 10 years, you've had lots of consolidation in the industry. So you've had like regional craft beer makers get purchased by large domestic companies. So the Anheuser-Busch InBevs of the world and the Molson Coors, Miller Coors in the US, they've basically regionally bought the larger craft brewers. And you as a consumer may or may not know that when you go to the store, because there's not a big sign on it that says Miller just bought this company. It may still seem like it's this great regional brewer. And that was inevitable as the industry got larger, that those things were going to happen. So it takes more education, I think, on the consumer now to understand that that's what's happening. I guess the good thing as a consumer is you really have great beer being available in all the outlets that you may go to purchase that. And you as a consumer can decide how local you want that purchase to be. So I try to advocate to people to say, here's the great Michigan alternative to that national brand that you're seeing out there. That national brand that may look like it's a craft beer, but it's really owned by a much larger company. Here's the Michigan version, the smaller version. So the local brewers are definitely being impacted by that from a price standpoint. So, and definitely as we've gone through COVID, what you've seen is people aren't having those pints in the establishment. And if that establishment didn't have a great program to offer to-go beer at a price that's within range of what the consumer wants, then they're suffering as a result of that, because most people are now buying their beverages from their local grocery store or their local party store. And those price points can be very different, because if you're a larger producer, you can bring that price down at a retail level that a small local producer could never really do. So it's a time for you to understand that as a consumer and know that you should really be out there. If you love your local brewery, you should be there supporting them in this time, because they're getting less traffic in the tap room where they really would make the most money.
Steve Johnson with us here on the Oakland County MegaCast. He is the owner and operator of Motor City Brew Tours, and he also does the monthly podcast Beer Tour Guy, which helps out the industry, educates everyone on the industry, and talks about the new and upcoming things in the industry. And with that being said, give us some of your inside secrets right now. Where are the top 3 Metro Detroit breweries that someone should go visit if they've never been to one?
I always say it depends on where you want to go in the city. So let's say we're in downtown Detroit. You could go to 3 great breweries right in Midtown. You could go to a couple breweries right in the downtown core. You can go to a couple breweries right in Corktown. So like if you were in Corktown, you got 2 great breweries there. Batch Brewing, which is a smaller player, and then Brew Detroit, which is a block away, and they're a contract brewer with a great tap room. If you're right in the downtown core, you could go to a brewery that's been there for over 10 years now, Detroit Beer Co. right by the stadium. Let's say you're going to a game, you should go there beforehand and have a beer. If you're over by Eastern Market, you have Eastern Market Brewing Company, which is a great local player that's about only 3 years old now and is making good product. They have a gorgeous looking tap room. If you came on one of our tours, for example, we might take you on a walking tour in Midtown, where you would go to the First Brew Pub in Michigan, which is Traffic Jam and Snug. That's a restaurant, brewery, bakery, dairy hybrid, and we would show you all that. A couple doors down from them is Jolly Pumpkin. They make amazing sour beers. And across the street from that is Motor City Brewing Works, which is one of the first breweries to open in the city once we opened up the brew pub laws in the 1990s. And those are all right by each other. So you could get a couple in Corktown, a couple in downtown Eastern Market, and 3 right there. If you went into the suburbs, the choices are in the dozens. If you're in the Royal Oak, Ferndale area, there's a half a dozen great breweries right in those areas. You could also get a couple meaderies in Ferndale with Bee Nectar and Schramm's Meadery. If you go a little farther out in the burbs, you have lots of great hard cider opportunities if you even drove all the way out to Armada and went to Blake's or Westview Orchards and Winery, which is in Romeo. So it depends on how far you want to travel to where we would say that. And that's not, I'm not even going up along I-96 and all the other options along there, which are almost endless all the way to Lansing now. So we're really in a great time of options in our area here, where you could really kind of throw a stick in any direction and have lots of great things to do. And that's what we try to do at Motor City Brew Tours is help you visit, experience those places in all those different directions, in all those different forms of transportation, whether it's bus, bike, walk, even boat, and experience and sample things from those great establishments.
This has been such an education for me, so I appreciate your time. I will say, the beer festivals are so popular. Eastern Market, when they have those each year, you have to get your ticket early because it sells out so quickly. Gone to the one in Grand Rapids. I will say I was surprised when people were wearing the necklaces with like beef jerky and cheese and crackers. I didn't understand the meaning of that at first. It looked a little strange to me.
Well, it's the idea to put it front and center in you to make sure you eat something while you're drinking. And what we all have done at some point, the first time you ever go to any large tasting event like a beer festival or a wine festival, is you're so excited by all the variety and seeing all the people that you sample, and you forget to eat something. And that's really where the tradition of having a pretzel necklace and adding all these great things like beef jerky and cheese and all these crazy things you see people put on these necklaces. It's sort of like, oh man, I need to eat something. I need to put something in my belly. That's why we have snacks on our bus, for example, like pretzels, for that same reason, because people will have a lot of fun and you need to put something in your stomach to balance it all out. And that's kind of part of that beer festival experience, which at times we run buses to beer festivals, including that one in Grand Rapids and the one in Ypsi and the one in Eastern Market. And we sure look forward to having great events happen like that again. That has definitely been a shame that we haven't been able to get together really this year to do that. It's definitely the thing I probably look forward to the most when we're able to have larger group gatherings for big tasting events again.
Well, we so appreciate your time, and we hope that you and the tours do resume sooner rather than later, because, nothing replaces the experience of being together in a group. Because when you do these bus tours or even a walking tour, by the end of the tour, you become friends with everyone in that group. So it's a great time, and such a great service that you offer as well. So we wish you guys the best of luck, and we hope that you're going to be able to continue the tours sooner rather than later.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate it, and getting to share some of my thoughts on the industry with you.
Steve Johnson, he's the owner and operator of the Motor City Brew Tours. You can also check out his monthly podcast, Beer Tour Guy. So if you're into the industry or just want to learn more about craft beer and all that it does for the state of Michigan, check out his podcast.